Today, on Guess What I Found Out, we are going to meet a river so old it watched the dinosaurs show up, get comfortable, and then leave. A river that was already ancient when the Himalayas were just a gleam in a tectonic plate's eye. And here is the kicker. Curious George. Most of the time, it does not even have water in it. Meet the Finke River in central Australia, known to the locals by its proper name, Larapinta, and known to me, starting right now, as Grandpa Creek. Grandpa Creek is widely called the oldest river on Earth. And before you fire up the comments to tell me that a dry ditch in the desert cannot possibly beat the Nile, hang on, because the truth here is weirder and a whole lot more impressive than the headline. Here is the thing almost everyone gets wrong. People hear oldest river and picture the same water sloshing down the same channel for 400 million years, like the planet just forgot to hit refresh. That is not what happened. Grandpa Creek is not old because one unbroken stream has been running since the age of early fish. It is old because its path, the actual line it traces across the continent, has stubbornly refused to move, while literally everything else did. Let me put that in perspective. Around 400 to 300 million years ago, Central Australia got squeezed in a mountain-building event called the Alice Springs orogeny. The ground buckled, ridges of rock heaved upward, and entire mountain ranges were born. And Grandpa Creek, already flowing south through the area, looked at the rising mountains, shrugged, and just kept cutting straight down through them. This is the part that, well, really breaks people's brains. If you take a look at the Finke from above, it doesn't politely go around the McDonnell, Crickhoff, or James Ranges like, a sensible river might. Instead, it slices directly through them, carving these deep gorges right across hard-folded quartzite ridges. That's the calling card of what geologists call an antecedent river, a river that was already there and just held its ground while the land rose up around it. Grandpa Creek didn't adapt to the mountains. No, the mountains had the audacity to grow up around Grandpa, and Grandpa simply didn't care. If a river that ignores entire mountain ranges out of pure spite is your kind of content, well, do yourself a favor and follow the channel, because this is exactly the sort of beautiful geological stubbornness we get into around here. So, how does an ancient path survive hundreds of millions of years of, an entire planet happening to it? Through one of the slowest magic tricks in all of nature. After the mountains rose, the climate went warm and humid for a very long stretch. That kind of weather, it chemically rots rock from the inside, turning solid bedrock into a thick, soft, clay-rich layer called saprolite, sometimes hundreds of meters deep. The whole landscape got buried in its own crumbly decay, and rivers wandered lazily across that soft surface, Grandpa Creek included, setting their roots into the mush. Then Australia drifted north. The climate dried out hard, and erosion stripped all that soft-weathered material away in a process with the wonderfully nerdy name of etchplanation. Once the soft stuff was gone, Grandpa Creek's path was left printed onto the hard bedrock underneath, like a stencil. That is why the river seems to ignore the modern rock structure entirely. It set its course on a surface that no longer exists, and then got slowly lowered onto the bones beneath. Now I want to hear from you, Curious George. Here is the question I keep chewing on. What is the single most impressive thing about this river? That it cut straight through rising mountains, that its ancient path survived being buried and then dug back out, or that it kept its identity through hundreds of millions of years of climate chaos? Drop your pick in the comments and tell me why you went with it. I read these, and your reasoning is usually better than mine. The receipts for all of this are written right into the landscape, and they are gorgeous. At a spot called Glen of Palms, you can see the river's entire autobiography stacked up in layers. High up the walls are fossilized meanders, old looping bends from a wetter, gentler era, now cemented into iron-hard ridges that sit well above the modern channel. The valley floor basically got flipped inside out over time, so the old riverbed now stands proud in the air as a ridge. Geologists call that inverted topography. I call it Grandpa refusing to rearrange the furniture. And the way the river carves has completely changed. Back in the humid Miocene, water flowed steady and calm, lazily sculpting those broad meanders. Today, Grandpa Creek is a desert river that is bone dry most of the year, and then, every so often, absolutely loses its mind. We are talking rare megafloods pushing at least 5,000 cubic meters of water per second, with some monster events possibly hitting 10 to 15,000. That is the difference between a slow Sunday stroll and getting bowled over by a freight train made of mud. Those violent short bursts are what gouge the steep modern gorges so quickly. And it is not even a steady process. The entire Australian continent has been slowly flexing and tilting, just a few hundred meters of warp spread across thousands of kilometers, which is somehow enough to make the river pause, fill its valleys with gravel, sit on that gravel for a few million years, and then start cutting all over again. We know this because the gravel itself, dated using cosmic ray exposure, shows it was buried for ages before being dug back out. Grandpa Creek does not just downcut. He procrastinates, hoards rocks, and then suddenly gets motivated. Honestly, relatable. So here is where we land, Curious George. The Finke is not a single old stream. It is a geological archive. Standing in one of its gorges, you are looking at mountain building, continental drift, deep chemical rot, a planet-wide drying out, and the ghosts of rivers that flowed before any of us were even a possibility, all stacked into one dusty, mostly empty channel. The label Oldest River was never about the water. It is about the line. And that line has outlasted the dinosaurs, the rainforests, and the mountains themselves, simply by refusing to relocate. If you made it this far, you clearly appreciate the kind of deep-time weirdness that hides in plain sight. So go ahead and hit subscribe and smash that like button, because the next thing I dragged out of the research rabbit hole is going to be just as gloriously strange, and you do not want to miss it. See you there, Curious George.